And welcome everyone. Welcome to this Q call led by one of our Q members, Ian Smith, Dr. Ian Smith, who wrote this paper about building QI capability, and more specifically about using the Kirkpatrick model to evaluate this link capability that was created. And he's here to first give us an overview of the model, how it works, how maybe we can apply in our own work situations. And then after that, he'll answer our questions. So with you, Ian Smith, please.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, folks. I think Joram's going to run the slides for me. We gave them a little test yesterday afternoon, and it seemed to work better when Joram ran them rather than when I did. So I'm probably going to say click a lot, and Joram's going to move them forward for us. We're going to see how it goes. So we're going to try a couple of things we've not done before. We've got a little practical exercise in the middle of this to do kind of a mini Kirkpatrick style evaluation, which we've not done before, and certainly not done before live on a webinar. So we'll see if that works when we get to that point. And I think the thrust of it is talk about a paper which was evaluating a program that I ran when I was working for NHS England. And the Kirkpatrick framework was what was used to do it. So we're going to talk about that. So if you want to launch the slides at any point that that you're ready, Joram, we'll work through. It looks like people are still coming. I've seen a couple of names flash past of people that that I recognise. So first thing to say, for this practical bit, you're going to need a piece of paper. Doesn't have to be anything special. I've got this little bit of what looks like a post-it notes, but it doesn't have any sticky on it. It's just a little coloured square. If you have a post-it note that is similar, that would be great. If you have a piece of paper on your desk or can grab one in the next 10 or 15 minutes before we get to that part, that would be ideal. If it's square, it's perfect. If it's not, it doesn't matter. We can cope with that. If you want to tear an edge off and get it roughly square, that would be great as well. But we're going to use that for this high quality interactive part of the presentation. I say high quality. We've not done it before, so we don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to give it a go. So if you want to grab a square of paper while you've got the chance to do it, please do. And if you haven't, you can just pretend you've done it when we get to that point later on, but hopefully some of you will. I'm going to say click, and hopefully John will move us on a slide. So we'll start with just the introduction. I think Joram's introduced me already. I'm Ian Smith. I'm currently working as an Associate Director of Planning and Business Development in South Tyneside and Sunderland. You might have got that from the Northeast, from the barely perceptible accent. In the role before I moved here about a year and a half ago, I was working in NHS England in the National Improvement Capability Building team. I was a program lead for improvement methodology, and our role there was to make learning and training available to people in quality improvement at the largest scale that we could. And one of the ways we did it was through the use of massive open online courses. One of those courses, this one here, Lean Fundamentals, was a paper published on that recently. I'm going to say click again to Joram. You'll see that paper there, published at the end of 2023. I think it was the last thing that I did at NHS England before moving on. And I think it's the publication that Joram and Matt saw somewhere and asked, would you present something on that for the Q community? To which I said yes. And it's come around very quickly from when I said yes. Quicker than I thought it would. So it's just been putting this together just this week. So it's not a tried and tested presentation that we've done before. It's a brand new one. So we'll see how it works. So the paper was out at the end of 2023. It's an evaluation of a massive open online course. You can see there's a link there, a bit.ly link. Matt or Joram might type that into the chat box if people want to click on that link and get hold of that paper straight away. I think there will be links to everything either on the references on the end of this presentation. I think a lot of the papers were already linked on the Q invite page as well. So if you're interested in the material, you should be able to get hold of it fairly easily. So mostly what we're going to do is talk about a little bit about the Lean Improvement Fundamentals course, what it was and why we did it, and then how the Kirkpatrick framework was used to evaluate it. And so we're going to try a bit of a live practical on that as well. So another click, please, Jorim, if you would. So first of all, start a little bit about the background to the massive online course. So massive online course is something that we had several of in NHS England. This was the last one that that team that I worked in built. It was the last one that I built, and it came about many. I know we're on a Q webinar, so a lot of people, most people here, very much in the quality improvement community. So I'm going to guess that most people will have heard of the Virginia Mason program. It's had a lot of exposure and a lot of traction. People might have seen Nicola Burgess, who evaluated that, possibly on Q or Health Foundation webinars talking about it. It's a fairly significant program that supported 5 trusts across the UK over a period of 5 to 6 years to learn and create local versions of Virginia Mason's lean approach. We work with some of those organisations that were in that. We had chief exec representatives and Nicola and Bernard from the evaluation team at Warwick, giving us input and feedback around what they were learning and what would be useful. And one of the things coming out of the evaluation was how the training and knowledge that were acquired by people in those organisations was being applied to make positive improvements and changes. And one of the things that we wanted to do, certainly that I wanted to do, was to make that some of that available beyond just the 5 trusts. We just come out of developing a previous massive online course that had gone well, and had the idea that maybe we can use that to make lean knowledge and skills available on a larger scale using the same approach. So the period of time, I say, learning from the likes of Nicola and others about what was coming out of the evaluations, plus the knowledge that we already had in the team. I started working with Virginia Mason in 2006 up here in the northeast of England, had quite a bit of knowledge and exposure to their approach. I thought, well, let's see if we can put that into a massive online course in a way that's practical and useful. So the idea of what came out of that was a very action-oriented massive online course that people could apply immediately to improve processes. The emphasis was on developing practical skills and to make improvements to a specific part of a process at a fairly small scale and quite tightly scoped. Those 6 modules in the course, it was accessed over an 8-week period and was free to access at the point of use at that time. And we delivered 5 cohorts of that between February 21 and September 22. So we'll talk a little bit more about what the 6 modules are a little bit later on. But for now, we're going to have a look, I think, at the Kirkpatrick framework, if Joram clicks for me, and roughly what that is. So folks might have come across this before. I was first introduced to this about 11 years ago. You can see there's a reference there at the bottom. The full reference is in the end of the deck. Gareth Parry and colleagues put a paper out about using the Kirkpatrick framework to evaluate improvement initiatives. So that's actual specific improvement work and improvement programs. It was initially developed to evaluate training and development programs. So that's what we're doing with it here. The Lean Fundamentals Massive Online course was a training program. So it's right in the space of what Kirkpatrick was designed to evaluate. There are other massive online courses that have used it, and there are some protocols for evaluating massive online courses that suggest this is a useful framework to use. There are other papers that myself and my team published using this framework for other things. So I think it's suitable for this type of course, but you can use it for evaluating improvement work generally. And Gareth Parry's paper, I think is quite a good one to look at. It is 10 or so years old now, but I found that a very interesting paper and still reference it and cite it. And you'll understand in a second why am I talking about that. So the program, the Kirkpatrick framework as designed, has 4 levels. And it's basically looking at reaction, learning, behavior, and results. So reaction is what did people think about the training or the learning or the development program? Did they like it? Did they enjoy it? Did they react to it in a positive way? Learning, what it says on the tin. Did participants acquire new knowledge? Did they learn things, basically? And behavior is largely about what people did with what they learned. Did they have the confidence to translate that and use it to do something? And results is what happened as a consequence of putting it into practice. So did it achieve some impact? Did it help to achieve organizational goals? And one of the things that we find with this framework, and particularly where it's been applied in a limited way to massive online courses that I could find, is usually the evaluations go at the first couple of levels. How did people react to it, and what did they learn? And there's various papers suggesting that we're not getting into the higher levels. So I thought, well, I think we can do that with this particular course. I think we've got data and information we can analyze to take us up to behavior and results. So I can see we'll get to that shortly. Why is this kind of relevant more generally? I'm going to ask Jorium to click again. Again, I'm guessing in this community, pretty much everyone's come across NHS Impact, NHS England's new approach to improvement. On their resource site on NHS Futures, again, you see the link in the bottom right-hand corner if you're not already a member of that site. They have tools and resources around the Kirkpatrick framework. And there's a proposal on there that it's a useful thing to evaluate your improvement work and your improvement training. So again, you can see the screenshot there from their site has the similar descriptions to the Kirkpatrick framework on there. There are wider resources about how you can use it in evaluation of improvement, and there are links to some papers that that have used it. I think this one is on there and a couple of others. So if you've not yet found your way to that and you're thinking about how do I evaluate my training or my QI programs, you're looking for a little bit more information about things, you'll find a little bit on there. And I say it brings it up to date, and it's quite contemporary. I think looking at Kirkpatrick through an NHS impact lens, given that they are recommending that. So one more click, please, Jorim. So think now a little bit about how we use this in this case example, the Lean Fundamentals MOOC, how to use that framework to evaluate a particular thing. So on the right of the screen as you're looking at it, we've got kind of an outline of what I was using to think about what data do I need and what information do I need to get up those different levels. And you can use the framework in that way when you're thinking about how do I evaluate my course or my improvement. You think, well, what's the data that I'm going to collect to tell me about reaction, learning behavior, results, and so on. So in this particular case, we're looking at rating and recommendation. So we asked people, did the course meet your expectations? Would you recommend it to other people? There's also the scope for people to give us qualitative feedback or comments as well. We'll see briefly some of those a little bit later on. But rating and recommendation was the main way we were measuring people's reaction. In terms of learning, we were looking at what was a participant's knowledge before the course and what was a participant's knowledge after the course. So this is driven by pre-course and post-course survey, where we're looking at the different modules and asking people to assess their knowledge before they're taking the course and afterwards. Similar thing for behavior, where we're asking about confidence to apply it. So we've got a topic and we want to know what's your confidence to apply that topic practically before you take the course. And unsurprisingly, what's your confidence now you've done it to apply that topic? So we've got a survey-driven approach to collate data around where participants see they've moved from and to around the topics we're trying to get them to learn. In terms of results, built into the massive online platform and built into the course design was a feature asking participants to share short case studies of what they'd done. So the whole design of the course was put together in a way to try and step people through I've just got someone's come off mute, which is just a little bit distracting. I don't know if we could put that on mute, if we could. The course was designed to walk people through a process of applying each thing they were learning in a defined sequence in a practical way to apply it to make a process improvement to a kind of a tightly scoped objective. And at the end of that, we provided a short 3-page case study template that was asking folks to complete that and describe what they'd done. And that template was based on the Squire guidelines, the standard quality improvement reporting guidelines, and uses a format that's been promoted by BMG Open Quality for quality improvement reports. And again, you see why that's important a little bit later on. So we're trying to capture the impact of what people did. And we've extended, you can see the Kirkpatrick framework here to a 5th level, which is return on investment. And that's proposed that the book you can see in the background there, Measuring ROI in Healthcare, effectively takes the Kirkpatrick framework and adapts it and proposes different tactics that can be used to assess impacts in terms of cost benefits and to use that to calculate return on investment. Again, we come back to how we did that in this particular case. So click, please, Jorian. So this is the bit where I need Joram to do some animation steps for me, so we'll see how well it works. But I think we should be okay. So, what we're looking at there in the screen, we've got a square, and if you consider that square to be a process, and if Joram gives me a click, we should see that processes typically they have inputs and they have outputs that hopefully lead to outcomes. So the inputs that we have into our healthcare processes are typically our staff and the equipment and supplies that they use. And the outcomes we hope to get are safe, effective, high quality, person centered care. And if we get those things, that should lead to some kind of patient outcome. So in our quality improvement community, we often talk a lot about variation and understanding variation as part of Deming's theory of profound knowledge. And if Joram gives me a click, we'll hopefully see some animation. So these squiggly lines that you see coming across the screen are representing if we have variation in our inputs, such as how our staff undertake their work, the equipment they have available to them, the supplies they have available to them, we might see variation in the outputs leading to variation in the outcomes. So one more click, please, Joram. So typically, what we look at is our outcome metrics and our process metrics and use measurement for improvement techniques to understand the variation in those metrics over time and take the knowledge that we learn from that to apply QI techniques to manage the inputs where we might be looking at if there's variation in how staff carry out the work, we might be doing some co-production work to create work standards that staff can work to that hopefully will reduce variation. If we're looking at variation in equipment, we might be looking at workplace organization techniques to reduce that variation in availability. And similarly, if we have variation in availability of supplies, we might be looking at supply flow and visual management techniques to try and reduce that. And again, if Joram gives us one more click, hopefully we'll see this idea that if we can reduce the variation in the inputs, hopefully it will lead to variation in the outputs and then to variation in the outcomes. So it's a quick whistle stop tour of looking at variation in processes using the process model. And if Joram gives us one more click, we're going to pause here to do our practical exercise as best we can, at least. So this is the audience participation bit. It's fairly simple. All you need is a piece of paper. I've got this little yellow square of paper, a non-sticky post-it note. If you have a post-it note like that, sticky or otherwise, it will work. If you have any piece of paper, preferably square, but it doesn't necessarily matter, that will be fine. I'm hoping that I've talked and filled long enough for folks to grab a piece of paper. And what we're going to do is we're going to carry out a process. So we're going to carry out the same simple process, and we're going to do it by, I'm going to give verbal instructions. You have to follow the instructions, if you will, and then we'll see what the results are. It is fairly straightforward. You do need a piece of paper to do it, and there is a little bit of tearing as well. So you've got some scissors on your desk if you need them. That will be fine as well. So I'm going to give the instructions. Hopefully people are ready to go. I can't see much by way of the camera screen, so I have no idea whether people are ready to go, but I'm going to go for it. So take your square or your piece of paper, and what I'd like you to do with it, the first step in the process is to fold it in half. So I'm going to do that as well, which I have now done. I'm just going to talk for a little bit in case folks need a little bit more time to do it, but hopefully you've managed to do step one and fold it in half. It looks like Joram's doing this along with us, I hope. So the next step in the process is to take what you now have, your folded piece of paper, and I'd like you to fold it in half a second time. So I've now done that as well. So I've done a second fold. Hopefully some of you, or all of you, if you have a piece of paper, have done a second fold as well. So depending on the size of the piece of paper and the thickness, this one might get a little bit more tricky. The next step, the third step in the process, I want to take what you now have and fold it in half a third time. So if you can do that, you've now got probably a smaller folded piece of paper, I'm going to guess. So now we've got that. There's one more step in the process. Let's say fill a little bit of time so that people can make their folds. If someone's coming late, you can hopefully catch up very, very quickly. Now's the tricky bit where scissors might come in handy if you've got a very small and very thick piece of paper. What I want you to do for the fourth step in the process is to tear a corner off. So you've got a folded piece of paper in your hand. What I'd like you to do is to tear a corner off that folded piece of paper. So I'm going to see if I can do that. So if you've got some scissors in your desk, tidy on your desk, and that makes it easier for you to do it, please feel free to do that. So we've now kind of reached the end of that. What I'd like you to do is just unfold what you've got, and then Jorium's going to click and move us on one slide more. So I'm going to hold up what I've got. So hopefully you can see what I've got. And what I've got looks like, I think, what's on the top left of the screen as you look at it. We've got a couple of options here. You can type into the chat box what you have. So if you have top left, you can type in top left. If you have top right, you can type top left, top right, or bottom middle. Or if it's something completely different, you can type that in. I think some of you may have access to pointers. I'm not sure. I don't, because I think I've come in through a web browser. So if, like me, you've joined via a web browser, you might not have access to a pointer, but you can type into the chat box. If you do have access to a pointer, you might be able to scribble on a screen or put a mark on it. But it seems like the chat's working okay for folks.
Would
I've
rather
just seen.
you have to click on the annotate button on the Zoom options, but yeah, of course the chat works just fine.
I think people have got the hang of the chat. If anybody does want to do an annotate, and you could find it and make it work, somebody's got something different. And okay, this is quite good. It looks like Barbara's got top left. So if you've got that on the top left, that means you've done it right, because you've got the same as I have. But I'm pretty sure a lot of you have got different things. Certainly Anne's got something different. I saw a lot of chat box coming across with different things. So it's probably not difficult to figure out why we might get different things. We've followed a very simple process, the same steps, but we've got many different results. Now, if we were to look at that to try and understand what are the root causes and why is that, then we'll probably quickly figure out there are multiple ways to fold at each step, and there are multiple corners that you could tear off, which can give multiple different patterns. But all it's trying to illustrate is that variation can creep in very easily into the simplest of processes. And when we think about what we do every day in the very complex processes of healthcare, you can see how variation can creep in very, very easily, and how even small amounts of variation can have quite a significant impact on outputs and outcomes. So hopefully folks have had it. They're still coming in. And there's some of those ticks are very neat that people found in the annotations. But hopefully people have had a chance to type it either into the chat or to annotate on the screen, and have got the idea of this idea of process variation and how the exercise illustrates it. So what we're now going to do, or what Jorium's going to do, is he's going to open for us a Zoom poll, and we're going to ask a couple of evaluation questions themed around the Kirkpatrick framework and themed around that kind of little micro teach point around process variation. So Jorium's going to find that. It might take a couple of seconds to load up. And we've got some questions on there, and we'll see what comes out. It looks like you might have to scroll down to see all of the questions. So the first question on there is asking us to give a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. So that's your reaction. Did you like that exercise, or did you not? So if you thought that exercise was great and it's the best thing you've seen at lunchtime ever, you might want to score it a 10. If you didn't, and you wanted to score it differently, that's fine. You also might want to give up on the webinar, because this is as much fun as it's probably going to get. But if you want to put a score in there, it looks like you might have to use the little scroll bar to see the next question. So there are some scores coming in, and there's a graph auto-generating as you do it, and it's looking to me like broadly we like it. There's somebody scored it a 5. You need to go. It's not going to get any better. No, that's grand. But it looks like we're getting scores. But what we're getting is a distribution of how the audience felt about the particular exercise. So hopefully it's doing its job in illustrating the point of how we can look at reaction. But I think if you pull the slider down on the right, we can see question 2 comes immediately after it. Again, it looks like some folks have started to put the scores in. And the question here is asking about your knowledge of process variation before we did that exercise. So we're still using this 1 to 10 scale, fairly straightforward. 1 being low, 10 being high. Probably should have said that before, but it seems like we've all assumed it. And we're getting a rating on where we see people. I'm aware it's an improvement community, and a lot of people know a lot about variation and a lot about improvement. But we've got quite a bit more of a distribution on this. Some people saying they don't know so much about it, and quite a few people saying that they do. That's fine. We'll see what happens when we. Sorry, John, go on.
We got over 75% of participation. Should we move to results?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hopefully you can see the results there. the host vision might be a bit different. So can a participant just confirm if the results are showing on screen?
You can only see your
Yeah,
own results.
You can only
there's a
see your
question
own.
came in there, a comment. I know I can see something. I think Jory made me a host, so I don't know if what I'm seeing is the same as what you're saying. Certainly, what I am seeing in terms of rating your knowledge after is a slight shift in the distribution upwards from fewer low scores and more higher scores. And then I think we've got a similar pattern in terms of confidence to apply what was learned. We see lower scores on the before, and we're seeing more higher scores, or more of them clustered into the higher end. I'm not allowed to touch the buttons. That was my instructions from Jorium at the poll.
Please
Point,
don't touch the buttons.
don't touch any buttons because
I
can
clicked
affect.
something. Just checking. Can you now see the results for everyone?
Somebody wants to be bold and give an answer.
Yeah, I need a participant to answer that.
No, it hasn't. I
No?
can only see my own.
I'll try one last button. 1 second.
Well, so say we've not tried this before live. I'm only in charge of the slides. Jorium does the polls.
Results. I press all the sharing buttons I possibly could. Could you folks see the everybody's results?
Just your own
share.
results still, I'm afraid.
Still see own results.
I tell you what.
Maybe they appear at the end. Is that possible that it's only at the end that they suddenly appear? I don't know.
I don't know either. But I do have a
share screen and
no, this won't work because this is part of Zoom. But I do have an idea, and you're gonna give me 30 seconds, and I'm gonna do some internet magic.
Okay. Oh, let's see what internet magic Jorium can do, and then we'll move on if it fails.
No, this will
Hopefully
certainly work. It's a bit janky, but you will forgive me for the results I can provide. 1 second. I am just screenshotting the results and quickly hosting it in an image hosting website. So it is fairly safe to say it's gonna work. And I got the results here. So let me share my screen again and show you what I have just uploaded. So
it works.
Lovely. So this is question number 1. Can you see it okay without any Zoom menus around?
I can see what you've shared as well as other folks. I think a
Perfect.
voice came through saying it works.
So now when you want to go to the other questions, just let me know and I'll switch the tab.
Yeah, just skip through them. You can see on that, I think, the reaction. And then if you skip through, I think we'll see a before. That's possibly knowledge before. You can see a wide distribution from kind of a wide flat distribution. Some people know quite a bit. And if you skip on again, I think that is possibly, I'm not sure if that's knowledge. Is it after or is it confidence before? That's after. Somebody still didn't feel like they knew very much. I think you can see it squeezing up into the 5 to 10 area more than it was previously. I think if you skip on one more, we should see confidence before. I can see confidence after. I don't know sure where confidence before went, but certainly you can see that that one's squeezed up. And is there another image to share, or is that all 4?
It was only 4 questions. The confidence before was question number 2, was this one here.
I think we might have lost one. Not to worry. I think it just about illustrates the point, and we'll see how it looks in the published evaluation where we're going to do something broadly similar with that data.
I'm sorry again for the improvised solution, folks, but at least we managed.
We did say this might not work. I'd say it partly worked.
Should I go back to the presentation now?
Yeah. Do you want to put us back on, and we'll skip through
1 second,
the last
let
of
me
those.
just get back where I was. And yeah, that should be working.
Let's just move us straight on into the next one, Jorium, and we'll go from there. So we've had a little bit of a look in a roundabout sort of a way at how we might use the Kirkpatrick framework to evaluate a micro teach exercise in that particular case with, I'd say, partial success, not entirely quite as we'd intended, but not too far away. So we're going to have a quick look at what was in the Lean Fundamentals course, just so that when we look at the results for learning and knowledge change, we can see where they've come from. So we talked about those 6 modules within that course. There was an induction session as well, and that's basically what was covered in each of the modules. Improvement kata, if folks haven't come across it, it's basically a routine-based approach to improvement, comprised of 4 steps, where we start with a challenge. But the second step is understanding the current state. The third step is setting a target condition to achieve on the way to the challenge. And the fourth step is using iterative, continuous and quality improvement methods to move towards the target condition upon which a subsequent one can be made until we get all the way to hitting the challenge or the aim at the end of it. The other modules are probably things more, I think, familiar to folks. I'm not saying people haven't come across improvement. It's just a little bit less well known, or used to be a few years ago at least. But you can see there are various improvement techniques and lean type techniques within it. And if you move us on again, Jorim, we'll start to look at some of the data on the Kirkpatrick levels. So we're looking at reach and reaction in the first instance. As we say, we had 5 cohorts of this run over 18 months. The first cohort was a little bit different in as much as it ran as a small private online course with a relatively small number of participants, and it was focused very specifically at COVID-19 vaccination processes as it was launched in February 2021, just as vaccines were becoming available. Cohort 2 was a massive online course, but it was still targeted at COVID-19 vaccination processes specifically. It was a couple of months later after the first one. And then we ran 3 more cohorts, 3, 4, and 5, all run as massive open online courses, and they were targeted at annual operational priorities, NHS England's published annual operational priorities. If you just kind of look across the bottom line, you'll get the summary stats across the whole program as it ran. So over 6,500 people enrolled to take part in that massive online course in one of the cohorts that ran. Around about 3,500 just under participated actively in the course. And you can see the response rates for the pre-course and the post-course surveys. Just over 2,000 people did the pre-course survey, 857 did the post-course survey. So we'll move on one more slide. And this will give you an overview of completions. One of the challenges that massive online courses get are the number of completions relative to the number of enrollments. What I did here was look for as many quality improvement massive online courses as I could find within the literature, and those that had sufficient data, use them to compare what were their completions like compared to enrollments versus this particular course. So I found 5 published examples where the data would allow me to do that. Lean Fundamentals, this particular study, is right in the middle with the arrow pointing at it. The lines that are running across, the horizontal lines, the red one and the yellow one, are from 2 studies looking at international completion rates from large-scale MOOC providers. That's places like Harvard edX and Coursera. So they provide an international benchmark for completion rates for MOOCs, which you can see on there is roughly between 5 and 6%. So you can see Lean Fundamentals is running at double that, at just over 12%. We've got 2 massive online courses which are around about the benchmark or lower, and we've got 2 that are higher. One of them, Improvement Fundamentals, came from us, from the same place, from the Improvement Capability Building team. It was one of our massive online courses as well. And Healthcare Redesign was from somewhere else, has a very high completion rate, but if I ask for a click from Jorium, we'll see the same data presented in a slightly different way. And what's different here, instead of the bar chart, is I'm plotting a dot, which is showing the completion rate on the same axis. That's running up and down. But the dots, how far left or right they are, depends on how many enrollments those courses got. So you can see that not only did we get quite high completion rates for Lean Fundamentals and Improvement Fundamentals, one of our other courses, we also got quite high numbers of enrollments. So Healthcare Redesign had quite a high completion rate and had a very small number of enrollments. There was another one there, which is on the benchmark, had quite a high number of enrollments and hit the benchmark. So you'll probably generally see the more enrollments you get, probably the smaller overall completion rate. But you can see where this course and another one from the same team sort of fits quite in a healthy position in the middle of that graph there. We're just trying to illustrate that the completions, although they could be perceived as 12-15% isn't a huge number, it's relatively quite high compared to the best benchmarks we could find for similar courses and international benchmarks generally. So move on one more, please, Jorim. So getting into the Kirkpatrick levels specifically here, reaction, what did people think of it? The ratings on this were very high, looking at asking people, did this meet your expectations? And were you likely to recommend it to colleagues? You can see almost 98% said it did meet their expectations. Just over 97% said they were likely to recommend it. And this is a fairly typical comment that we saw in the qualitative feedback. Obviously one that I liked, having designed the course, people saying it's brilliant. I've recommended it to so many people, but just illustrative that people felt strongly enough to tell us that they thought it gave them some value. And I think the stats kind of bear that out quite well. Another click, please, Jorim. This is what the learning change data looked like. So we have got histograms similar to the ones that we flashed past there on the Zoom polling exercise, the ones that Jorim put up on the screen. Haven't brought them here onto this slide deck, just in the interest of space. If you do want to click on the full paper, if you download the one with the supplementary data in it, there's a 16 or 17 page summary which has all of the analysis in it and includes histograms of the before and after position for both this and the confidence for all of them. But you can see the average scores there on the Likert scales that we're using. We're using a 1 to 5 one in this rather than a 1 to 10. You can see the average scores for all of the different course modules that we looked at just briefly before. And the dark blue bars, which are the lower ones, are the before, and the lighter blue bars are the knowledge after. You see there's quite a considerable change in that, and that is a statistically significant change. There's a statistical test for this particular type of data that was used to test that. It's called a Wilcoxon signed rank test, but the paper will describe that for you if you want to know about that or follow up any of the references. But it is highly statistically significant, the change that was indicated by the participants, where there was both a pre and post course outcome giving a matched pair, which is around about the 857 mark. And if you give us one more click, we're going to see a very similar slide for behavior. So it's a different question. This is how people felt about being able to apply it. And again, we'll probably just look at the quote on this. The graph's very similar. It was done in a similar way. It's also statistically significant to a high level. And this is a typical comment from those who gave them, where they're saying that it gave them the tools to apply it into the situations that they work within and allowed them to ensure efficiency and productivity. So people were saying, yes, we can apply it, and we are applying it. I think if we click one more, we'll start to see a little bit around how people have applied it and what the impact of that is. So we talked at the beginning about designing into the platform and the course a way to capture what had people done and what was the impact of it, using these project improvement reports that were asked for and uploaded to the system. Over the 5 cohorts, we collated 511 project improvement reports from participants on this course that had been shared with us. I say the 3-page document's quite simple, 2 pages of text, 1 page for charts. And can we share the template? And if I've still got one available, I'll send it through to Jorim to share with folks afterwards. You can see just an example. If it's a little bit small, you weren't meant to read it, just an indication of what they looked like on the screen. Some of them, most of them describe quite well the early part of the project. Some of them went all the way through to completion, and some of them were very highly impactful. Indeed, as there are 2 examples on here, one about post-COVID service recovery, reducing waiting lists and times, which was very impactful, and another one from our COVID vaccination support, which came a little bit earlier. And again, that one increased the capacity in a vaccination centre and those around it to the extent that it was equivalent to them having opened a whole new one with no additional resources. Both of those 2 very high impact cases have also been written up and published. You can see the references on the bottom, and there are links to those, I think, already on the Q website and in the slide deck at the bottom. So we managed to demonstrate that not only were people using what they'd learned, they were applying it in a way that could have, and in some cases did have, very impactful results. And there's one more click to do. This return on investment is adding in this dimension of what was the cost benefit versus the cost of putting the course together. So we used tactics from Phillips and Buzzacaro's book, which give a whole different range of ways to try and assess how can I convert impacts into a common metric, usually money, so you could calculate a return on investment. The way we did it for this course was to look at what would have been the cost of training if delegates had to purchase that from somewhere else. So we made this course available for free. The only other way to kind of access lean training typically is to pay for it. And what we looked at was, are there similar online courses? We were in kind of COVID times at this point, so there was a lot of stuff online. So it's similar courses that were delivered online and would deliver similar content. And what would it have cost for all of those who participated within the course to have accessed it versus what did it cost us in terms of the platform, the time to develop it, and the time to deliver it? So the training cost avoidance, quite a conservative estimate here, looking at a value of training considerably lower than some of the commercial offers we could find. We estimated it's something in the range of 1.7 to 3.4 million avoided in costs if folks had to buy that rather than access what they access directly, free of charge. And comparing that to what it cost to build it and deliver it, the return on investment using those same numbers, we estimate it was anywhere between 11 and 23 pounds for every pound spent. So I think quite a significant return on investment. And I think one more click, please, Joriam, and we'll pretty much at the end of the information. So the key points from this that I think it demonstrates that massive online can help people to learn improvement skills and large numbers of them. They can avoid costs associated with commercial training, at least if they were delivered in the way that this one was, and therefore generate a return on investment. And I think it helps add to the evidence base that it can be an effective and efficient way to build improvement skills at large scale. In terms of the Kirkpatrick framework, it's not new, it's been around for a long time, but it remains useful for evaluating training and development, and as it's been proposed for evaluating improvement programs as well. I think it's worth people kind of having a look at that and seeing if it's going to be useful to you in your own work. That brings me kind of to the end of what I've said. If Joram gives one more click, you'll see the references that we've shared in the slides above, and the ones that certainly the ones that myself and team members publish, the ones with the lines under, they're all linked directly to those papers if they offer any interest to you. And I'm going to circulate to Joram a PDF of what we've discussed today, if that's going to be useful to people, and those links will come through to you. So thank you very much, folks, for listening and having me here today to talk about that. Apologies, our experiment didn't go entirely as planned, but I think it was close enough, I'm going to say, for a first go. I'm going to hand back to Joram. I don't know what you want to do. You've got a little bit of time. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any, but I'm also happy enough if they don't.
Thanks
if they've
so
had
much.
enough of us and they want their lunch, I
Thank you
understand.
so much. That was brilliant. And folks, we do have 15 minutes for questions. If you never participate in one of those Q&As, we use this reaction button here on Zoom. So you can use this raise hand button so that we have an order of people to ask the questions. If you by any chance you're joining through a browser or something like that, you can also type in a chat and me or Matthew will raise a hand for you. And also, if you'd rather not say out loud your question, if you'd rather us read it, you can also type it and just let us know that we're supposed to read it, and we'll do that for you, okay? So we have a first question.
It's
please,
nice seeing some names that I recognise flash past. Oh, there's one. Hello, Andrew Longway. I haven't seen you for a while.
Hi, Ian. Lovely to see you. What a great presentation. Fantastic stuff. Yeah,
Speaking of the devil, hello.
I don't have a question. Well, I've got some in my head, but none to come out with. Just greeting you. Yeah, sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, well, it's nice to see you, Andy Longway. It's good to see you, sir.
Good
I
to
thought
see
you had a question there for a moment. It's turned into a social. If people do have questions, I'll do my best.
We have our first question waiting. Meg.
Okay.
I love this, and I love the ROI that you put in terms of the cost around the training delivery side of things. But did you have a cumulative, like, impact in terms of the savings of the projects themselves from all the PIRs you had? That's really interesting to me. Is that like knock-on effect?
It would have been more if we'd been able to do that. So what I can tell you about the COVID vaccination one. The COVID vaccination centre, I think we kind of whistle-stop through that. That was one of the early, really high-impact projects when we were targeting COVID vaccination process, when COVID vaccination just started and throughput was the thing. And those very simple techniques were applied in a relatively new large-scale vaccination centre that had been a victim of the much-published overbooking that happened through the National Booking Service. So they wanted to apply to one, fix that problem and be ready for when everybody came back 12 weeks later, because it was going to happen again if they didn't. And they used those techniques. One of the course participants was working there, used this to do it. And they were sharing what they were doing with 6 other vaccination centres in that patch. And what they effectively, the way they described it was, we had, I think, so many lanes of throughput for vaccination. And by being able to increase the capacity of all of those, they described it as we added a virtual lane, because they were kind of overproducing, if you like, through those lanes more than had been intended. So rather than being behind, when they had the booking snafu, they were able to put more through, and they were sharing that with all of the 6 sites. So they were all making the same changes, and they got to the point where they could do a whole other large-scale vaccination centres worth of work between them with no new resources. And if you know what a I'm not going to say a number on here because some of it was never published, but if you know what a vaccination centre costs to set up, they created a vaccination centre's worth of capacity through these simple techniques with no new resources. So there is a figure that could be attributed to that. That one alone makes a massive impact on just the figures we've shared. But all that I put through here is the cost avoidance from not paying for training. But yes, there were costable benefits to some of improvement projects. Some of them would be a bit too difficult to say. Some of them were very small in their impacts, but there were certainly some projects, that one in particular, where there could be reasonably large numbers attributed to them if we had the time and resources to do it more thoroughly. But I've not included them within this paper. So yeah, I think there was a bigger impact than we've reported, but I didn't want to kind of always the benefits without having a more thorough analysis of it.
Yeah, that's fair. And the only reason I asked the question is because I'm doing our internal training program, and obviously we will have the ability to do the ongoing calculation of our savings impact. And always very interested to look at how other people are doing that. So yeah, really, really interesting. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, and best of luck with your evaluation, Meg.
I have my raised hand here, but actually I'm representing 2 people in the chat, so I'm actually going to keep my hand raised so I can ask one and then the other. Both Laura and Anne apologize for being busy office settings. There's half of them to talk, so they typed. So Laura is asking, did you use these results to adapt your training or offer any other follow-up sessions?
So what's that question about using it to adapt it?
Yeah, did you use the results to adapt, or it's something extra after the session?
So yeah, yes and no. Yes, no, and both is the answer to that. So we were collecting evaluation data for each cohort. So yes, we did make changes between cohort 1, 2, and subsequent cohorts based on things that we were learning. So there were slight differences between them. So yes, on that point. In terms of was this thing something we did after? Yes, this evaluation paper here came at the end when I had data for 5 cohorts. At that point, I was just about to leave NHS England. For those who still work there, it's gone and just coming out of a large transition. It's changed kind of its structures and how it works. I'm not sure whether this course is something they'll run again or wish to. I genuinely don't know. But I'd kind of finished my tenure at that point, so I thought it would be a good point to kind of evaluate the total impact that this particular course had. I felt quite passionate about the work we did on that, so I wanted to kind of get some outputs and some closure around. We did this, thought it was quite good. So yes, we adapted as we went, and no, it's not been further adapted from this paper because it was kind of an evaluation of what was done over those 5 cohorts. So that's my kind of yes, no, and both answer. That I hope that's helpful or acceptable to those asking it.
Good stuff. And just so you folks know, I know there's only my hand raised, but there's like 3 questions on the chat
Okay.
already, so it's hectic here. So Anne asked, but she said a great session, thanks. And then, is there experience of someone else objectively assessing change in behavior and results rather than being self-assessed and trying to avoid bias of self-assessment?
It's a good point. I mean, these ones are self-assessments. Again, if you read this paper or any of the other ones that we did using this approach, that's highlighted as a limitation, potential bias about what we did. There are other potential biases in and different challenges if you go externally. Against one of the things that's flagged in one of the other papers mentioned is the burden of evaluation. So there are other instruments and things you could use, so to maybe be a little bit more rigorous around it, but you might find, I think that we looked at where it had very low participants, it also had very low evaluation uptake, partly because of the burden of doing it. So there's a bit of a trade-off between the absolute rigor of it and getting enough information. So we went a particular way and recognized those shortcomings that you flagged. So yeah, I'd be interested in seeing what other people want to do. If there are others who are running either training or massive online courses and looking at different ways to evaluate, I would encourage them to do it. I'd be curious to look at what people did, but that's the approach we took, and say we acknowledge the limitations in the papers that we wrote.
Grand. Let me get the next question here from the chat. Paul says, question about before and after questions. On confidence, I have used, how confident do you feel on a scale of X to Y, so similar to the one.
Yeah.
On knowledge, I have used quiz type questions that relate to QI knowledge as a multi-choice to keep
Yes.
it quantitative. I wonder what other question techniques might work well.
This particular course did have quiz questions at the end of each module, so there were some like knowledge test quiz questions. They weren't particularly hard, and they were mainly designed at embedding key points and knowledge, if you will, because you're kind of seeing it at multiple times. So there were quiz questions in this. The main kind of assessment of what you learned was how you felt your knowledge had changed in this particular evaluation. So yes, you could use knowledge quizzes. If you were to use more rigorous ones, and you might be, then you could report on those percentage scores, if you will, as a perfectly reasonable way to assess knowledge change. I thought about doing it for this, but I say the questions weren't really designed as an assessment as such, more as a reinforcement. So I kind of stuck with what we had. You could do both, of course. You could get the self-assessments from the participants and your knowledge quiz and look at both things within that domain.
Grant, the next question comes from Diane, who sent me a DM, so you're not seeing this question in the chat. This is possible, by the way. If you'd rather in the future, you can send me a DM. Have you considered an alternative evaluation method?
That's a good question. In terms of a different framework to Kirkpatrick, there are different frameworks for course evaluations. There's a couple that I came across in the literature review, or different methods for different levels. I wouldn't be opposed to different ones. I use different things depending on what I'm trying to achieve. It's just that this is the particular approach applied to this evaluation, and we'd applied it to other MOOCs within my team stable at the time. So I guess that's the one we used, but I'm certainly not opposed to other ones. There are other frameworks, and even within Kirkpatrick, you can go at how you answer the questions at the levels in a different way. I think the framework gives you an outline of, it would be good to know the reaction, the learning change, the behavior change, and the results. Obviously, you've got multiple options within those 4 levels of the framework about how you might choose to do it, depending on what you're trying to achieve and the practical solution you can come up with to get the data you need to answer it. So I'm not kind of wedded to there's only one way to do it, if that's kind of what the question is, but that is the way we did it on this one.
Grand. And I'm going to move to our last question, but before I do that, just a couple of people here asking where to get the materials or where to get a particular questionnaire for something. First of all, when you get the presentation, you'll see the last page, as we briefly saw, has all the references. So there's a plethora of information there. Probably what you're looking for is there. And if not, we're also going to put the presentation and everything on the Lean SIG, or you can contact Ian directly on the Q website. So if you need something extra in terms of material, one particular PDF or something like that, then we can provide that over there. So for the last question, Yvonne asks, for the segment on behavior, what assessment tools did you use to capture data on how the learning was applied to practice?
That comes through there's probably two sources. There's a lot of information comes through the qualitative stuff. There are comments within the pre and post course surveys, particularly the post course survey, that are helpful. There's also a lot comes through the massive online course itself. It's not a static thing. It's not like the stat and man training that you do. It's just you versus some training. You're interacting with other people on the course, and you are interacting with us, the faculty. So there's a lot of commentary goes in. So there's a lot of information about how people are using what they're learning from actually doing the course, which can be used in the evaluation, but isn't directly part of the evaluation. And then there's the project improvement reports at the end, where you can see how it's been applied in the way that it's written up, how what's been learned has been applied to the challenge or the specific project name that folks had come up with. So that it takes a bit more work. I think that's probably why maybe evaluations of this do a little bit more on the bottom rungs, where it's relatively easy to get some quantitative data, and maybe a little bit less on the higher levels, where it takes longer to get and it's a bit more difficult to do. And inevitably, as with this, the sample sizes are still large here, but they did go down as you're getting into the higher levels, and it took 5 cohorts to accumulate a large-ish sample across all of it. But those project improvement reports, you can see exactly what people have done with what's been in the course content to achieve or try to achieve the thing that they were going at. So I think probably that tells you not just what the impact is, but how people used it very specifically in the context of the thing they were trying to do.
That was it, folks. Thank you so much, Ian, for all this knowledge. It's been great. It's one of the best calls we had this year. Thank you so much.
That's kind of you. Appreciate the opportunity to share it, and thanks to folks for coming along to hear about it.
And folks, as I said before, everything will be shared on the Q websites, on the SIGs, on Ian's personal page as well. And if you press that button when you sign up for Zoom, you're also going to get this material as an automatic e-coms follow-up, probably in the middle of next week or something close to that. Thank you so much for participating, and we hope to see you again in future calls.
Thanks, folks.